Okay, let's get started, shall we? Oop, gotta remember to uncover the camera, don't I? Okay, at least we have sound this time. All right, I'm assuming these glasses are semi-clean. All right, so two more chapters or articles or whatever these are supposed to be tonight, and that takes us through book one of this. Book two is what blogs mean and the monster attacks, what blogs mean. So we'll get into that next time, but we'll read these two. There's Tactics 8 and 9. So here we go. So we are on Chapter 11, Tactic 8, Use the Technology Against Itself. And our quote is, actions are constrained by income, time, imperfect memory, and calculating capacities, and other limited resources, and also by the available opportunities in the economy and elsewhere. Different constraints are decisive for different situations, but the most fundamental constraint is limited time. That's by Gary Becker, Nobel Prize winning economist. Okay. Sometimes I see a preposterously inaccurate blog post about a client or myself, and I take it personally, thinking that it was malicious. Or I wonder why they didn't just pick up the phone and call me to get the other side of the story. I occasionally catch myself complaining about sensational articles or crummy writing and placing the blame on an editor or a writer. It's hard for me to understand the impulse to reduce an important issue to a stupid quote or unfunny one liner. This is an unproductive attitude. It forgets the structure and constraints of blogging as a medium and how these realities explain almost everything blogs do. Where there is little volition, there should be little bitterness or blame. Only understanding, as I have learned, can be turned to advantage. The way news is found online more or less determines what is found. The way the news must be presented in order to meet the technical constraints of the medium and the demands of its readers determines the news itself. It's basically a cliche at this point, but that doesn't change the fact that Marshall McLuhan was right. The medium is the message. Think about television. We're all tired of the superficiality of cable news and its insistence on reducing important political issues into needless conflict between two annoying talking heads. But there's a simple reason for this. As media critic Eric Alterman explained in Sound and Fury, The Making of the Punditocracy, TV is a visual medium, he said. So to ask the audience to think about something it cannot see would be suicide. If it were possible to put an abstract idea to film, producers would happily show that instead of pithy sound bites. But it isn't, so conflict, talking heads, and B-roll footage are all you'll get. The values of television, Alterman realized, behave like a dictator, exerting their rule over the kind of information that can be transmitted across the channels. Blogs aren't any different. The way the medium works essentially predetermines what bloggers can publish and how exactly they must do it. Blogs are just as logical as the television producers. Alterman criticized. It's just a matter of understanding their unique logic. To know what the medium demands of bloggers is to be able to predict and then co opt how they act. Hemmed in on all sides. Why do blogs constantly chase new stories? Why do they update so much? Why are posts so short? A look at their development makes it clear bloggers don't have a choice. Early bloggers, according to Scott Rosenberg in his book on the history of blogging, Say Everything How Blogging Began, What It's Becoming, and Why It Matters, had to answer one important question: how do our readers know what's new? To solve this, programmers first tried new icons, but that didn't work. It was too difficult to tell what the icons meant across many blogs. On one site, new might mean the latest thing published, and on another, it might be anything written within the last month. What they needed was a uniform way to organize the content that would be the same across the web. Tim Berners-Lee, one of the founders of the web, set a procedure in motion that would be copied by almost everyone after him. New stuff goes at the top. The reverse chronological order on one of the web's first sites, called stacking by programmers, became the de facto standard for blogging. Because the web evolved through imitation and collaboration, most sites simply adopted the form of their predecessors and peers. Stacking developed as an implicit standard, and that has had extraordinary implications. When content is stacked, it sets a very clear emphasis on the present. For the blogger, the timestamp is like an expiration date. It also creates considerable pressure to be short and immediate. In 1996, 3 years before the word blogger was even invented, proto-blogger Justin Hall wrote to his readers at links.net that he'd been criticized at a party for not posting enough and for not putting his post right on the front page. Quote, Joey said he used to love my pages, and Hall wrote, but now there's too many layers to my links. At suck.com, you get sucked in immediately, no layers to content, end quote. It's really an illustrative moment. If you think about it, in one of the first data stamped posts on a blog ever, Hall was already alluding to the pressures the medium was putting on content. His post was 93 words and basically a haiku. This was not a man of too many layers, but Suck.com had just sold for $30,000, so who was Hall to argue? So he resolved to put a little something new at the top of the website every single day. We can trace a straight line from this conversation in 1996 to the post per day minimums of blogs like Gizmodo and Engadget in 2005, and to today when authors of guides like Blogger Bootcamp tell prospective bloggers that the experience of publishing more than 20,000 blog posts taught them that, quote, rule number one is always be blogging, end quote, and that the best sites are, quote, updated daily if not hourly, end quote. Since content is constantly expiring, the bloggers face the Sisyphean task of trying to keep their sites fresh. Creating a newsworthy event out of nothing becomes a daily occurrence. The structure of blogging warps the perspective of everyone who exists in this space. Why would a blogger spend much time on a post that will very shortly be pushed below view? Understandably, no one wants to be the fool who'd wasted his or her time working on something nobody read. The message is clear. The best way to get traffic is to publish as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and as simply as possible. The Huffington Post Complete Guide to Blogging has a simple rule of thumb. Unless readers can see the end of your post coming around 800 words in, they're going to stop. Scrolling is a pain, as is feeling like an article will never end. This gives writers around 800 words to make their point. a rather tight window. Even 800 words is pushing it. The Huffington Post says, since a block of text that big on the web can be intimidating, a smart blogger, they note, will break it up with graphics or photos and definitely some links. Isn't it just amazing that an 800 word article is an intimidating something to read? Like, what? I, I can't even put it into words how pathetic we have become. Anyway, but that's coming from somebody that loves to read. So, in a retrospective of his last 10 years of blogging, publisher Malik of GigaOM bragged that he'd written over 11,000 posts and 2 million words in the last decade, which, while translating into 3 posts a day, means the average post was just 215 words long. But that's nothing compared to the ideal Gawker item. Nick Denton told a potential hire in 2008 that it was, quote, 100 words long, 200 max. Any good idea, he said, can be expressed at that length, end quote. Preposterously faulty intuition like this can be seen across the web on blogs and sites of all types. The pressure to keep content visually appealing and ready for impulse readers is a constant suppressant on length, regardless of what is cut to make it happen. In a University of Kentucky study of blogs about cancer, researchers found that a full 80% of the blog posts they analyzed contained fewer than 500 words. The average number of words per post was 335, short enough to make the article on the Huffington Post seem like lengthy manuscripts. I don't care what Nick Denton says. I'm pretty sure that the complexities of cancer can't be properly expressed in 100 words, or 200, or 335, or 500 for that matter. Even the most skilled writer would have trouble conveying the side effects of chemotherapy or how to discuss the possibility of death with your children in just a handful of words. Yet here they are, the majority of posts barely filling 3 pages, double-spaced in a 12-point font. They wouldn't even take 3 minutes to read. More recently, one of Politico's co-founders, Jim Vandehei, launched a new site called Axios, which is in part a reaction to his belief that much of today's journalism is too long. Quote, people don't want the pieces we're writing, he told Recode. They're too damn long, end quote. I don't know what internet this guy has been hanging out on, but I can't say I am often struck when reading that the piece was just too in-depth and too well researched. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever had that reaction. Of course, it's not completely the blogger's fault. People are busy and computers are fraught with distraction. It would be crazy to think that entrepreneurs wouldn't adapt their content around these facts. The average time users spend on a site like Jezebel is a little over a minute. On the technology and personal efficiency blog Lifehacker, they can average less than 10 seconds. The common wisdom is that the site has 1 second to make the hook. 1 second. The bounce rate on blogs, or the percentage of people who leave the site immediately without clicking anything, is incredibly high. Analysis of news sites has the average bounce rate pushing well north of 50%. When the statistics show a medium to be so fickle that half the audience starts leaving as soon as they get there, there is no question that this dynamic is going to seriously impact content choices. Studies that have tracked the eye movements of people browsing the web show the same fickleness. The biggest draw of eyeballs is the headline, of which viewers usually see only the first few words before moving on. After users break off from the headline, their glance tends to descend downward along the left-hand column, scanning for sentences that catch their attention. If nothing does, they leave. What slows this dismissive descent is the form of the article. Small, short paragraphs, 1 to 2 sentences versus 3 to 5, seem to encourage slightly higher reading rates. as does a bold-faced introduction or subheadline, occasionally called a deck. What what blogger is going to decide they're above gimmicks such as bulleted lists when it's precisely those gimmicks that seem to keep readers on the page for a few priceless seconds longer? Jacob Nielsen, the reigning guru of web usability, according to Fortune magazine, and the author of 12 books on the subject, advises sites to follow a simple rule: 40% of every article must be cut. But despair not, because according to his calculations, when chopped thus, the average article loses only 30% of its value. Oh, only 30%? It's the kind of math publishers go through every day. As long as the equation works out in their favor, it's worth doing. What does it matter if the reader gets stuck with the losses? Once at a lunch meeting with an editor of Racked, New York, a blog about retail shopping in New York City, the incredibly influential blogger told me that she did all her shopping online. Quote, "So you wear our clothes, but you never go in our stores," end quote. I asked, since she was wearing American Apparel at the meeting. Quote, "I just don't have time to go shopping anymore," end quote. There was a store within blocks of her office and two others on her way home. This was literally her beat. I guess it doesn't matter anyway. Where would she put personal observations in a 200-word post, even if she had them? I once watched as an editor at the site of Media Gazer tried to do her fact checking for a story about me by simply tweeting out into the universe. After watching her hilarious attempts to verify my credibility, quote unquote, by asking people I'd never worked with and never met, I finally logged onto Twitter to send my first message in years. At Lyra McKee, have you thought about emailing me? Right, and then he gives his email, Ryan.holiday at Gmail. Why would she? Though I'd actually be able to answer her questions. Tweeting out loud was easier than emailing me, and it meant she didn't have to wait for my response. Plus, I'm boring and would have rained all over her speculation parade. When Nielsen talks about cutting 40% of an article, actually knowing anything about what they're talking about is what bloggers leave on the cutting room floor. As a manipulator, that's fine with me. It makes it easier to spin or even to lie. It's not like I have to worry about them they're verifying it. They don't have time for anything like that. A writer has minimums they must hit, and chasing a story that won't make it on the site is an expensive error. So it's not surprising that bloggers stick to 800 or fewer word posts about stories they know will generate traffic. Jack Fuller, a former editor and publisher of the Chicago Tribune, once admonished a group of newspaper editors by saying, quote, "I don't know about your world, but the one I live in does not shape itself so conveniently to anybody's platform," end quote. For bloggers, it would be nice if life were all exciting headlines and a clean 800 words and happened to self organize all its juicy bits down the left hand column. The world is far too messy, too nuanced and complicated, and frankly, far less exciting for that to be the case. Only a fool addicted to his laptop would fail to see that the material demanded by the constraints of their medium and the material reality gives them rarely and the material reality gives them rarely match. On the other hand, as a marketer, I quite like these fools. Check for the key under the mat. Most common question I hear from people trying to market stuff: how do I pitch blogs? Um, no need to ask me, the blogs straight up tell you. Every few months, blogs trot out the tired old story of how to pitch coverage to them. They advise publicists to do a better job emailing the blogger and assuaging their ego if they want the blogger to write about their clients. From a reader's perspective, this is all rather strange. Why is the blog revealing how it can be manipulated? In turn, why do we not head for the hills when it is clear that blogs pass their manipulation on to us? Some favorite headlines. Okay, and we have a list of headlines here. Rules of thumb for pitching silly claims to TechCrunch. How not to pitch a blogger, number 648. Read Write Web. Dear PR folks, please stop sending us experts and story ideas. Here's what to send us instead. Business Insider. A private note to PR people. Scobalizer. How to pitch a blogger, as in brazen careerist, the blogger writing it. The do's and don'ts of online publicity for some reason. Lindsay Robertson, Jezebel, New York Mag, and Huffington Post. The unintended consequences of that kind of coverage is that it is essentially a manual with step-by-step instructions on how to infiltrate and deceive that blogger with marketing. I used to be thankful when I'd see that. Now I just wonder, why are you doing this to yourselves? Making lemonade. Let's just say Fuller's advice does not have a wide following online, particularly his reminder that reporters owe a, quote, duty to reality, not to platforms, end quote. In fact, bloggers believe the opposite, and that sucks for everyone, except marketers, because once you understand the limitations of the platform, the constraints can be used against the people who depend on it. The technology can be turned on itself. I remember promoting one author whose book had just spent 5 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, meaning people were willing to pay for it in one medium. When I was trying to post material from the book on various popular blogs, it became clear that it was just too long. So we got rid of the thoroughness and the supporting arguments and reduced it down to the most basic provocative parts. One chapter, the same chapter people enjoyed fully in book form, had to be split up into 8 separate posts. To get attention, we had to cut it up into itty-bitty bites and spoon-feed it to readers and bloggers like babies. If a blogger isn't willing or doesn't have the time to get off their ass to visit the stores they write about, that's their problem. It makes it that much easier to create my own version of reality. I will come to them with the story, I'll meet them on their terms, but their story will be filled with my terms. They won't take the time or show the interest to check with anyone else. Blogs must, economically and structurally, distort the news in order for the format to work. As businesses, blogs can see the world through no other lens. The format is the problem, or the perfect opportunity, depending on how you look at it. And that is Chapter 11 and Tactic 8. So, moving right on into Tactic 9, Chapter 12, titled Just Make Stuff Up, Everyone Else is Doing It. Our quote is, those who have gone through the high school of reporterdom have acquired a new instinct by which they see and hear only that which can create a sensation, and accordingly their report becomes not only a careless one, but hopelessly distorted. End quote. That is by Hugo Munsterberg, The Case of the Reporter, McClure's 1911. I guess that's The Case of the Reporter is the title. McClure's would be the magazine, written in 1911. Okay. The world is boring, but the news is exciting. It's a paradox of modern life. Journalists and bloggers are not magicians, but if you consider the material they've got to work with and the final product they crank out day in and day out, you must give them some credit. Shit becomes sugar. If there is one special skill that journalists can claim, it is the ability to find the angle on any story. That the news is ever chosen over entertainment in the fight for attention is a testament to their skill. High-profile bloggers rightly take great pride in this ability. This pride and this pressure are what we media manipulators use against them. Pride goeth before the fall. No matter how dull, mundane, or complex a topic may be, a good reporter must find the angle. Bloggers descended from these journalists have to take it to an entirely new level. They need to find not only the angle, but the click driving headline, an eye catching image, generate comments and links, and in some cases, squeeze in some snark. And they have to do it up to a dozen times a day without the help of an editor. They can smell the angle of a story like a shark smells blood in the water, because the better the angle, the more the blogger gets paid. Technology and big data have exacerbated this process too, finding meaningless correlations and anomalies to make hay out of. I just heard an anchor on SportsCenter report in all seriousness that a hit was the fifth longest Cubs home run since 2009. Come on. As Drew Curtis of Fark.com, that's Fark.com, says, quote, problems occur when the journalist has to find an angle on a story that doesn't have one, end quote. A few years before Drew, in 1899 to be exact, the Washington Post reported, quote, the New York Times has such abnormal keenness of vision that it is occasionally able to see that which does not exist. The ardency of its desire sometimes overcomes the coolness of its reasons, so that the thing it wants to see shows up just where it wants it to be, but in so intangible a form that no other eye is able to detect, no other mind finds ground to suspect its presence. End quote. The difference between the New York Times and blogs a century later is that the New York Times was dealing with at least somewhat worthy material. Bloggers latch on to the most tenuous wisps of news on places like Facebook or Twitter and then apply their abnormal keenness, quote unquote, to seeing what is not there. A writer for the Media Bistro blog, 10,000 Words, once advised new bloggers that they could find good material by scanning community bulletin boards on Craigslist for, quote, what people are complaining about these days, end quote. I'm not a sociologist, but I'm pretty sure that that doesn't qualify as representative news. Considering that anyone can post anything on Craigslist, this gives us a pretty good idea of how to create some fake local news. If they don't mind seeing what isn't there, marketers are happy to help. My company once worked with a musician to leak some of their tracks to Craigslist's missed connections section. Angle hunters sometimes come up empty. In a perfect world, writers should be able to explore a story lead, find it leads nowhere, and abandon it. But the luxury is not available online. As the veteran bloggers John Biggs and Charlie White put it in their book Bloggers Boot Camp, there is, quote, no topic too mundane that you can't pull a post out of it, end quote. This is their logic. As a marketer, it's easy to fall in love with it. Blogs will publish anything if you manufacture urgency around it. Give a blogger an illusory 20-minute head start over other media sources, and they'll write whatever you want, however you want it. Publicists love to promise blogs an exclusive sorry, Publicists love to promise blogs the exclusive on an announcement. The plural there is not an accident. You can give the same made-up exclusive to multiple blogs, and they'll fall all over themselves to publish first. Throw in an arbitrary deadline like, quote, we're going to live with this on our website first thing in, or I'm sorry, we're going live. We're going live with this on our website first thing in the morning, end quote. And even the biggest blogs will forget fact-checking and make bold pronouncements on your behalf. Since bloggers must find an angle, they always do. Since you know how hard they're looking, it's easy to leave crumbs, fragments, or stray gems that you know will be impossible for them to resist picking up and and turning into full-fledged stories. Small news is made to look like big news. Non-existent news is puffed up and made into news. The result is stories that look just like their legitimate counterparts, only their premise is wrong and says nothing. Such stories hook with false pretenses, analyze false subjects, and inform falsely. I told you earlier about how we paid celebrities to tweet offensive stuff, but the reality was we mostly tried to pay them to do it. Only the skeeviest of accounts actually agreed to do it and went through with it. But I still wanted the coverage, so we mocked up what the tweets would have looked like if they had said yes, what it would have looked like if Kim Kardashian had admitted she didn't know how to read. The blogs that covered the story were fine with blurring the line between what happened and what almost happened, or what could have happened, because it was better for business. The same went for when one of my clients, James Altucher, offered one of his books for sale via Bitcoin, and another, a musician, young and sick, posted his album on the so-called darknet. In both cases, like zero people actually bought them there, but since we made it seem like a much bigger deal than it was, media coverage ensued. Nobody bothered to investigate. Why would they? When I say it's okay for you to make stuff up because everybody else is doing it, I'm not kidding. M.G. Siegler, once one of the dominant voices in tech blogging, for TechCrunch and Pando Daily, is very blunt about this. According to him, most of what he and his competitors write is bullshit. Quote, I won't try to put some arbitrary label on it, like 80%, he once admitted, but it's a lot. There's some bullshit, there's more bullshit there than there is 100% legitimate information, end quote. Shamelessness is a virtue in Siegler's world. It helps create nothing from something. It helps people at the Huffington Post stomach creating stories like Amy Winehouse's untimely death is a wake-up call for small business owners, quote unquote. The same holds true for reputable outlets like outlets too. God, why am I stumbling so much? They need only the slightest push to abandon all discretion, like the Daily Mail in the UK when I had some deliberately provocative ads posted on the American Apparel website and pretended they were part of a new campaign. Has American Apparel gone too far with creepy, controversial new campaign? The Mail's headline read. According to whom had it gone too far? The article quoted some tweeters, quote unquote. Thanks for the free publicity, guys. Random people on Twitter are not a representative sample of any measure. But I got the company in the news. But it got the company in the news. God knows what it would have cost to pay to run those full page ads in their paper. Whatever will be more exciting, get more page views, that is what blogs will say happened. Like when Gawker bought a scoop from a man who had pictures of a wild Halloween night with politician Christine O'Donnell. According to editor Remy Stern, the skeevy sources' one concern was, quote, that a tabloid would imply that they had sex, which they did not, end quote. The headline of the Gawker article was, drumroll, I had a one-night stand with Christine O'Donnell. Do their research for them. One of the older leftist critics of media is that media is dependent on existing power structures for information. Reporters have to wait for news from the police. They get facts and figures from government figures. They are reliant on celebrities and other newsmakers for information. This is a totally valid criticism. It was true in 1950, and it's really true now. Newspapers and local media used to have the budget to send a reporter to local town hall meetings. Now they don't. They used to be able to pay to have an overseas bureau to get news where it was happening. Now they wait for the official report to come in. The AP, for instance, Associated Press, has actually started to outsource some of its reporting to India and in some cases to actual robots. When you read a short story about how the market went up 300 points due to strong job numbers from the White House, it might be that a computer wrote that story, not a human being. My point is that the media is now even more dependent on others to do their research and work for them. Nowhere is this sad state of affairs more obvious than in current science reporting, although scientific journals remain restrained by the practices and ethics of science? Yeah, right. University websites and publicists are not. Nearly every day, some minor finding is touted as an enormous breakthrough in a press release that goes out to reporters. These bloggers, simply looking for traffic, are never going to question the headline. They're not even going to read the paper. They're just in it for the headlines. I mean, can you beat this one from the Huffington Post? Beards are covered in poop. Study. Okay. One brave journalist recently stood up to this practice and showed how bad things were. He orchestrated a study that collected loads of random data and then, finding simply a correlation between dieting and eating chocolate, created a fake institute to announce his monumental but absurdly unscientific findings. You can lose weight by eating chocolate. And bam, everyone from the Huffington Post to the Daily Mail was cheering the news. Of course, you can't seriously lose weight that way. The institute didn't exist, the science was junk, the whole thing was a prank. Yet millions of people were given this fake news. If the journalist hadn't revealed himself, there might be a lot of people out there justifying that extra chocolate bar as part of their diet. It's obvious why this happens, though, and how it can be replicated. Set up your own think tank, call it the Millennial Entrepreneurs Foundation, and put out research that really just makes companies think they need to hire you as a consultant. Don't think climate change is real. Have a business interest in making people think it is. It isn't. Fund studies that confirm what you want and then blast the internet with them. Want to invent some ridiculous new trend? Hire experts to say it's correlated with higher sex drive or that it's all the rage with celebrities. Sadly, no one is going to question you. Always wrong, never in doubt. Trolls are not the only ones responsible for fake ideas spreading through the internet. At American Apparel, I had to deal with a pesky blog called BNet, on which a reporter named Jim Edwards would troll through the company's financial disclosures and come up with some of the most fantastical misinterpretations I could imagine. We brought this on ourselves, having made the company and its advertising such a juicy subject for gossip and entertainment blogs. It was natural that other page view hungry writers would try to get in on the game. Still, even as I knowingly fed that monster, I did not expect what happened with Edwards. The man once asked critically in a blog post, not a request for comment, why the company did not roll a last minute necessary to make payroll personal loan from Dov Charney at 6% interest into the larger loan from investors at 15% interest. I assume the answer is so obvious to normal people like you that I do not need to explain that 6% is less than 15%. Edwards posed this question not once but several times in several posts, each with a more aggressive headline, e.g., How American Apparel's CEO Turned a Crisis into a Pay Raise. From our conversation after he published this post, quote, well, it's a conversation, so there's back and forth. Me, I don't know if you recall, but we discussed your assertion about the 6% interest rate. You issued a correction on this story in 2009. Jim Edwards, I do recall, but I'm quoting the status of Charney's loans directly from the proxy. Is the proxy wrong? Me, your basic understanding of math is wrong. End all of that quote. He made bold speculations like, quote, why American Apparel CEO must resign and is American Apparel CEO facing the end game, end quote. He'd concoct ridiculous conspiracy theories, including one that accused the company of timing controversial ads to coincide with SEC mandated announcements to distract the public from corrupt dealings inside the company, and as proof would use the very non existent loan scandal he'd uncovered. Not to mention that the ads weren't new, and some weren't even actual ads, just fake ones I'd leaked online. Did he ever come to actually meet anyone at the company he was writing about? Did he familiarize himself seriously with the industry? Did he reach out to reliable experts to confirm these speculations? No, of course not. One kook is hardly a problem, but the obliviousness and earnest conviction a kook maintains in their own twisted logic makes for great material for other sites to disingenuously use by reporting on what the kook reported. As part of the CBS Interactive Business Network, Edwards' blog on BNet featured the CBS logo at the top. Since he looked like he had some official industry status, his questions became fodder for fashion websites at the national level. Fictive interpolation on one site becomes the source for fictive interpolation on another, and again in turn for another, until the origins are eventually forgotten. To paraphrase Charles Horton Cooley, the products of our imagination become the solid facts of society. It's a process that happens not horizontally but vertically, moving each time to a more reputable site and seeming more real at each level. And so, in Edwards' case, American Apparel was forced to deal with a constant stream of controversy born of one man's uncanny ability to create an angle where there wasn't one. And Edward is now a top editor at Business Insider. He even wrote about this book when it came out and made a 10-page slideshow attacking it so he could get 10 times as many page views as he would have with an actual article. Imagine if an enemy had decided to use him as a cat's paw, as I have done with other such bloggers. The damage could have been even worse. As I wrote to a company attorney at the time who mistakenly believed we could reason with the blogger, quote, basically these blogs have a hustle going where one moves the ball as far as they can up the field and then the next one takes it and in doing so reifies whatever baseless speculation was included in the first report. Jezebel needs Jim Edwards' reporting to snark on. Jim Edwards needs Jezebel's controversy to justify his analysis, and all this feeds into the fashion news websites who pass the articles along to their readers. Posting a comment on his blog doesn't interrupt this cycle. End quote. Neither would the lawsuit the lawyer was considering. It would just give Edwards more to talk about. In this situation, I was tasked with defending a company against exactly the type of subtle mischaracterizations and misleading information that I use on behalf of other clients. The insanity of that fact is not lost on me. What makes it all the more scary in this case is that there wasn't someone like me behind the scenes exerting influence over the information the public saw. The system was manipulating itself, and I was called in to mitigate that manipulation with more manipulation. What else could I expect? Early on, I worked tirelessly to encourage bloggers to find non-existent angles on stories I hoped they would promote. I made it worth their while, dangling page views, traffic, access, and occasionally advertising checks to get it going. After a point, they no longer needed me to get those things. They got traffic and links by writing anything extreme about my clients. And if I wouldn't be their source, they would make one up or get someone to lie. Other advertisers were happy to profit from stories at our expense. The Jezebel/Edwards cycle wasn't some conspiracy, it was partly my creation. It should be obvious that companies must be on guard against the immense pressures that bloggers face to churn out exciting news to their advantage. Do something perfectly innocent. Prepare to have it wrenched out of context into a blog post. Do something complicated, expect to have it simplified until it's unrecognizable. It goes in both directions. Do nothing, you can still turn it into something. Do something wrong, don't despair, you can spin it beyond comprehension. If you play in this world as a manipulator, prepare for faux outrage, which becomes real outrage, when you don't deserve it, and expect actual violators to get off without a peep. Those are the economics in the angle-hungry world of Jim Edwards. We're now at a place where, as a staffer in the Obama White House put it, quote, the controversy machine is bigger than the reality machine, end quote. Get used to it, because it's true for Trump and every president. It's why I can safely say that all the infamous American Apparel controversies were made up. Either I made them up or bloggers did. To the public, this process was all invisible. Only as an insider was I able to know that bloggers were seeing that which was not there. They had been so trained to find big pictures that they hardly knew the difference between real and made up. It's even hard for me to avoid falling for the occasional confabulation myself. There are too many, and they are often too pervasive to completely resist. For that reason, even some employees at American Apparel succumbed to the persistent accusations of people like Edwards and began to believe them. The accumulation of reporting, quote unquote, trumped their own personal experience. There were thousands of these unnamed and unknown victims out there, collateral damage in a system where bloggers and marketers can just make stuff up. And that is the end of that chapter and that book. So we're on to book 2. Okay, so that puts us at maybe just shy of halfway through the book. Well, there's quite a section of notes at the end. So yeah, we're halfway through. So we'll start into that next time. And where'd my bookmark go? There we go. We'll start into book 2 next time. It should be Tuesday. All right. And I am not going to raid tonight. I'm just going to call it there. So I will see you all in the next reading. Have a good night.
Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not nights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's over now. Not nights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. Just tell me it's it's not happening. Tell me